I don't know you.
This house was empty. You don't belong here.
Step off my driveway. I own this house. You're trespassing.
Don't reach for anything. I saw you grab your waistband.
These are keys. You're lying. And you just put my life in danger.
911?
Marcus Thorne had absolutely no idea that the Ring camera mounted on the stucco archway of his new home was recording the prelude to a legal apocalypse. At 48 years old, Marcus was a man who understood the weight of evidence better than almost anyone in the state. As the chief deputy state attorney for the largest county in the region, he managed a team of 40 prosecutors signed off on wiretap warrants and decided which homicides were charged as capital crimes. He was a man of the law, dressed today not in his usual charcoal-tailored suit, but in a faded navy t-shirt and cargo shorts, moving boxes and grocery bags from the trunk of his SUV. Standing next to him was his wife Elena, a 46-year-old corporate contract negotiator who could spot a loophole from a mile away. They were tired. It was a Saturday afternoon in the affluent enclave of Silver Creek, a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured to the millimeter and the homeowners association bylaws were thicker than the Bible. They had closed on the house 3 days ago. This was their first real weekend in the residence, and they were stocking the kitchen. It was a mundane domestic scene, a husband and wife, successful professionals unloading a week's worth of organic produce and cleaning supplies. But to Kyle Vinson, watching from across the street, this wasn't domestic. It was an invasion. Kyle was 34 years old, a man who had inherited his father's landscaping business and his mother's anxiety, but none of their common sense. He stood on his porch, arms crossed over his chest, watching the black SUV parked in the driveway of 4209 Oakwood Lane. The house had been empty for months. Kyle liked it empty. It meant nobody parked on the street. It meant quiet. Now he saw 2 black strangers walking in and out of the front door, and his mind didn't go to new neighbors. It went to looters. Kyle pulled out his phone. He didn't check the neighborhood Facebook group where the sale of the house had been posted. He didn't walk over to introduce himself. He zoomed in with his camera app, snapping blurry photos of Marcus and Elena. In his mind, he was the first line of defense for Silver Creek. He was the self-appointed captain of a neighborhood watch that existed mostly in his own head. "Look at them," Kyle muttered to himself, stepping off his porch and walking briskly across the street. Broad daylight. Unbelievable. Marcus had just lifted a heavy case of sparkling water from the trunk when he heard the footsteps crunching on the gravel at the end of the driveway. He didn't look up immediately. He assumed it was a jogger, or maybe a neighbor coming to welcome them. He set the water down on the pavement and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Excuse me?" a voice called out. It wasn't friendly. It was the sharp, demanding tone of a hall monitor with a badge he bought online. Marcus stood up and turned around. He saw a man in a polo shirt and khaki shorts standing at the edge of his property line phone held up like a shield. Marcus smiled, a reflex from decades of political functions. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," Kyle said, stepping onto the driveway. "What are you doing here?" Marcus's smile faded, replaced by the neutral, analytical expression he wore during plea negotiations. "I'm unloading my groceries. I'm sorry, have we met? I'm Marcus. My wife and I just bought the place." Kyle scoffed. It was an ugly, dismissive sound. "You bought the place?" "This house listed for $1.2 million. You expect me to believe you just bought it?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "But I do expect you to get off my driveway." "I know the owners." Kyle lied. He didn't know the previous owners. He just knew they were an elderly white couple who moved to Florida. "And you're not them. I've seen people casing this neighborhood lately. We don't tolerate that here." Elena walked out of the garage freezing when she saw the confrontation. "Marcus, is everything okay?" "Everything is fine, Elena," Marcus said, keeping his eyes on Kyle. "Just a neighbor who is confused about property laws." "I'm not confused," Kyle snapped. I'm calling the police. You need to leave. Now. Go ahead and call them, Marcus said, reaching into his pocket. Kyle flinched, taking a step back. Marcus slowly pulled out a set of keys. I have the keys to the house. I have the deed in the study. But frankly, I don't owe you a discovery file. You are trespassing. Kyle's face turned a blotchy red. He felt his authority fragile and imagined crumbling. He backed up to the sidewalk, thumbing his phone. You think you're tough reaching into your pockets like that? I saw that. I saw what you have. Marcus frowned. I have keys, you idiot. Kyle put the phone to his ear. He didn't just call the non-emergency line. He dialed 911, and when the operator answered, Kyle Vinson made the decision that would cost him everything. He decided to lie. 911, what is your emergency? There's a burglary in progress at 4209 Oakwood Lane, Kyle said, his voice rising in fake panic. 2 suspects, a male and a female. They're looting the place. Are they armed, sir? Kyle looked at Marcus, who was simply standing there, shaking his head. Yes, Kyle said breathlessly. The man. He has a gun. I saw him reach for it in his waistband. He threatened me. Please hurry, I think they're going to shoot. Marcus heard the words. He stood frozen, staring at the man on the sidewalk. He knew the penal code by heart. He knew that filing a false report of a crime was a misdemeanor, but claiming a weapon was involved escalated the police response from a patrol check to a high-risk felony stop. Elena, Marcus said quietly, go inside. Lock the door. Do not come out until I tell you. Marcus, what did he just say? Elena's voice trembled. He just swatted us. Marcus said, the icy calm of the prosecutor taking over. Go inside, now. Elena hesitated, then turned and ran into the house. Marcus remained in the driveway. He knew that if he ran, the responding officers would see a fleeing suspect. If he went inside, they might breach the door with a battering ram. His best chance of survival was to stand in plain sight empty-handed and pray that the officers who responded were better trained than the man who called them. 3 minutes. That was all it took. The silence of the suburb was shattered by the wail of sirens. Not one, but 3 distinct sirens approaching from different directions. The response time for an armed burglary in progress involving a gun threat was immediate and overwhelming. Kyle Vinson stood on the sidewalk, retreating behind a large oak tree phone still recording. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He had done this. He had summoned the cavalry. He felt powerful. A black and white cruiser screeched around the corner, jumping the curb slightly as it braked in front of the house. A second cruiser boxed in the driveway from the other side. A third unit blocked the street. Doors flew open. Police, show me your hands! Let me see your hands! The commands were screamed at maximum volume. Officer Miller and Officer Davis, partners for 2 years, were already behind their open doors, service weapons drawn and leveled at Marcus's chest. They were young. Miller was 26, Davis perhaps 24. They were pumped full of adrenaline, expecting an armed gunman who had just threatened a neighbor. Marcus stood perfectly still. He spread his fingers wide. He slowly raised his hands above his head, turning his palms forward so they could see he held nothing. My name is Marcus Thorne, he announced, his voice projecting clearly without shouting. I am the homeowner. I am unarmed. I am complying. Turn around, Miller screamed, stepping out from behind the door but keeping his weapon trained on Marcus. Face away from me, do it now. I am turning around. Marcus narrated his movements. I am moving slowly. He pivoted on his heel, his back to the officers, hands still high in the air. On your knees, get on the ground. Marcus paused. He was wearing shorts on concrete. He was the chief deputy state attorney. He had dined with the police chief 2 weeks ago, but he also knew that Officer Miller wasn't seeing a colleague. He was seeing a suspect description provided by a liar. Officer, Marcus said calmly, I am the homeowner. I have ID in my back right pocket. The man who called you is lying. I said get on the ground or you will be tasered, Davis yelled, moving up on the flank with a taser drawn while Miller covered with the firearm. Marcus lowered himself to his knees, crossing his ankles. I am on the ground. I am not resisting. Kyle Vinson shouted from behind the tree. That's him. That's the guy. He's got a gun in his waistband. I saw it. Officer Miller's eyes darted to Kyle, then back to Marcus. The witness corroboration tightened his trigger finger. Where is the weapon? Miller shouted at Marcus. Where is the gun? There is no gun, Marcus said, staring at the garage door in front of him. I was unloading groceries. That man is filing a false report. Miller and Davis advanced. They moved in a tactical formation, closing the distance. Miller holstered his weapon and grabbed Marcus's left wrist, wrenching it behind his back with force that was entirely unnecessary. Do not pull away, Miller grunted. I am not pulling away, Marcus said through gritted teeth as his shoulder joint screamed in protest. You are hurting me. There is no need for this force. Shut up, Miller spat. He grabbed the other wrist and snapped the handcuffs on. The metal bit into the skin. You're detained. Detained based on what reasonable suspicion? Marcus asked, his face pressed toward the hot concrete. You have a phone call from an unreliable informant versus a compliant subject standing in his own driveway with organic milk and paper towels. Miller hauled Marcus to his feet. We got a call about an armed subject. You match the description. Description? Marcus looked Miller in the eye for the first time. Black male in a driveway. That's the description. Black male threatening neighbors with a firearm, Miller corrected. He began patting Marcus down aggressively, shoving his hands into Marcus's pockets. He pulled out the wallet. He pulled out the keys. No gun, Davis announced, having swept the immediate area. I don't see a weapon on him or in the open bags. Miller looked at the keys in his hand. He looked at the wallet. He should have opened the wallet. He should have looked at the ID. But he was angry now. The adrenaline dump was fading, leaving behind irritation. This suspect was talking back. This suspect wasn't trembling. He was lecturing. Check the car, Miller ordered Davis. Do not enter my vehicle, Marcus said sharply. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle or my home. Miller stepped into Marcus's personal space. I don't need your consent, pal. We have probable cause. A witness saw a weapon. A witness saw a fantasy, Marcus countered. You have no articulable facts to support a search. You have a warrantless search situation and you are about to violate the Fourth Amendment. And I am telling you right now, officer. He looked at the nameplate. Miller, if you open that car door, you are ending your career. Miller laughed. It was a nervous, arrogant laugh. Is that a threat? Are you threatening a police officer? It's a legal advisory, Marcus said. Open my wallet. Look at the badge next to my driver's license. Miller didn't open the wallet. He tossed it onto the hood of the police cruiser. I'll look at it when I'm booking you. Davis tossed the car. Officer Davis hesitated. Miller, he's got keys. Maybe we should just check the ID. I said toss the car, Miller snapped. He didn't want to be wrong. He couldn't be wrong. Not with Kyle Vinson standing there with his phone out filming the heroic arrest. Miller felt the need to perform to justify the aggression he had already displayed. Davis opened the driver's side door of the SUV. He began rummaging through the center console. This is an illegal search, Marcus stated loudly, directing his voice toward Kyle's phone and the officer's body cameras. I am stating for the record that I have identified myself as the homeowner. I have provided keys. I have denied consent. The officers are proceeding without a warrant and without probable cause as the pat-down yielded no weapon. You're a real sea lawyer, aren't you? Miller tightened his grip on Marcus's arm. You know what you're under arrest. For what? Marcus asked. Disorderly conduct, Miller improvised. And obstruction of justice. You're interfering with an investigation. Asserting my rights is not obstruction, Marcus said. District of Columbia vs. Little, Camara v. Municipal Court. You need to read your case law. I'm done listening to you, Miller said. He shoved Marcus toward the back seat of the cruiser. Get in. Kyle Vinson walked closer, zooming in on Marcus's cuffed hands. Gotcha, Kyle sneered. Thought you could just break in here. Good job, officers. Get him out of here. Marcus paused at the door of the cruiser. He looked at Kyle. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked almost pitying. Make sure you keep that video, neighbor. Don't delete it. It's evidence in your felony trial. Get inside. Miller shoved Marcus's head down and pushed him into the hard plastic seat. The door slammed shut. The air inside was stale and smelled of sanitizer. Marcus shifted his weight, trying to find a position that didn't cut off the circulation to his hands. He closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't thinking about the humiliation. He was thinking about the checklist. Preservation letter for the 911 call. Preservation letter for the Bodycam footage. Subpoena for the neighbor's phone. Civil rights complaint under 42 U.S.C. Secker 1983. He opened his eyes and watched through the cage as Officer Davis walked back from his car. Davis looked worried. He was holding something he had found in the center console. It wasn't a gun. It was a leather folio with a gold seal embossed on the front. Davis said something to Miller. Miller waved him off, refusing to look at it. Miller was committed now. He got into the driver's seat. You comfortable back there? Miller asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Marcus didn't answer. He just stared at the back of Miller's head, memorizing the shape of his haircut, the sweat on his neck. He remained silent for the entire 11-minute drive to the precinct. The patrol car pulled into the sally port of the North District Station. The automatic garage door rumbled shut behind them, sealing them in the concrete intake bay. Miller killed the engine. Let's go, Miller said, opening the back door. He hauled Marcus out. Marcus walked tall despite the awkward center of gravity caused by the handcuffs. He knew this building. He knew the layout better than Miller did. He had walked these halls 1,000 times, usually through the front door, wearing a suit flanked by detectives seeking his approval on warrants. They walked through the heavy steel doors into the booking area. The smell of industrial cleaner and floor wax was overwhelming. Behind the high booking desk sat Sergeant Thomas Kowalski. Kowalski was 58 years old, a 30-year veteran who had seen everything. He was drinking coffee and reviewing a shift schedule. He didn't look up initially. What do we have? Kowalski grunted. Another drunk and disorderly? Interference, obstruction, disorderly conduct, Miller recited proudly. Suspect was aggressive, resisted the investigation. Matches the description of an armed burglary suspect. Name? Kowalski asked, typing on his computer. Refused to give it. Miller lied. But we have his wallet. Miller tossed the wallet onto the high counter. It slid across the laminate surface and stopped near Kowalski's coffee mug. Kowalski sighed. He picked up the wallet. He flipped it open. The silence that followed was absolute. Kowalski stared at the ID, then he stared at this badge next to it. State Attorney's Office, Chief Deputy, Marcus Thorne. Kowalski's face drained of color. He looked up, peering over his reading glasses. He looked at Marcus, standing there in a t-shirt and shorts, hands cuffed behind his back. Miller, Kowalski said. His voice was very quiet. Miller, please tell me this is a joke. Please tell me you didn't just bring Marcus Thorne into my booking room in cuffs. Miller looked confused. Who? Marcus Thorne. Kowalski roared, standing up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. The Chief Deputy State Attorney, the man who prosecutes cop killers, the man who signs your overtime checks. Miller's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Marcus. Marcus just raised an eyebrow. Take those cuffs off him, Kowalski commanded, coming around the desk. Right now, and somebody get the captain, get the chief, get everybody. Miller fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. He struggled to find the keyhole on the cuffs. I didn't know, Miller stammered. He didn't say. I told you to look in my wallet, Marcus said calmly as the cuffs clicked open. He rubbed his wrists where deep red indentations were visible. I told you to check my ID. I told you I was the homeowner. I told you the search was illegal. Kowalski was standing in front of Marcus now. Mr. Thorne, sir, I don't even know what to say. Are you injured? My shoulder is strained, Marcus said, rolling his arm. And my constitutional rights have been shredded, but physically I'll survive. Officer Davis was standing by the door looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Who authorized the search of his vehicle? Marcus asked, looking directly at Davis. Miller did, Davis said instantly. He ordered it. I told him we should check the ID first. You still did it, Marcus said. Color of law, you're both liable. The doors to the admin wing burst open. Captain Reynolds, the precinct commander, ran in. He wasn't wearing his tie. He looked like a man who had just been told his house was on fire. Marcus, Reynolds said, breathless. My God, I just got the call from Kowalski. What the hell happened? Your officers were swatted by a racist neighbor, Marcus said coolly. And instead of investigating, they decided to arrest the homeowner because he dared to quote the Fourth Amendment. I thought he had a gun, Miller whispered. The witness said. The witness lied, Marcus said. And you bought it because it fit your bias. You didn't find a gun. You didn't find stolen goods. You found a man unloading groceries. Captain Reynolds turned to Miller. His face was purple. Give me your badge and your gun. Place them on the counter. Sir, you are relieved of duty pending an internal investigation. Now. As Miller slowly unbuckled his gun belt, the heavy steel door opened again. Kyle Vinson walked in escorted by a patrol officer who had brought him to give a formal statement. Kyle looked around, smiling, expecting to be congratulated. I'm here to give my statement, Kyle announced. I'm the one who called it in. Did you book him? The room went dead silent. Captain Reynolds, Sergeant Kowalski, Marcus, and the disgraced officers all turned to look at Kyle. Marcus took a step forward. He wasn't cuffed anymore. He looked at Kyle with the cold, predatory focus of a prosecutor about to deliver a closing argument. Hello, Kyle, Marcus said. Kyle's smile faltered. Why aren't you in a cell? Captain, Marcus said, not taking his eyes off his neighbor. I'd like to file a criminal complaint against this individual. Violations include filing a false police report, misuse of the 911 system, and harassment. We'll take that report right now, sir, Reynolds said. Kyle looked around the room. He saw the anger on the cops' faces. He realized slowly and with horror that the blue line he thought he was part of had just turned into a wall, and he was on the wrong side of it. Wait, Kyle said. I was just being a good neighbor. You lied about a gun, Marcus said. You swatted my family. You put my life in danger. And you recorded it all on your phone. Captain, seize that phone as evidence. Hand over the phone, Reynolds ordered the escorting officer. You can't do that, Kyle shrieked. That's my property. It's evidence of a crime, Marcus corrected. Seize it. The legal offensive that followed was described by legal scholars as shock and awe. Marcus didn't just file a complaint. He went to war. By Monday morning, the 911 tape was public. The audio of Kyle Vinson's frantic lying voice claiming he saw a gun was played on every news station in the state. By Monday afternoon, the doorbell footage from Marcus's house was released. It showed the entire interaction. Marcus's calm demeanor, Kyle's aggression, the arrival of the police, the immediate escalation by Officer Miller, and the unlawful arrest. The juxtaposition was damning. The video showed a calm black man unloading groceries and a hysterical system trying to crush him. On Wednesday, Marcus filed a federal civil rights lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. Secker 1983 against the city, the police department officer Miller and officer Davis. The suit alleged unlawful detention, false arrest, excessive force, and malicious prosecution. It was drafted by Marcus himself, 40 pages of scorching legal prose that cited every relevant Supreme Court precedent. But he didn't stop there. He filed a separate civil suit against Kyle Vinson, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, malicious prosecution. He sued for damages totaling $5 million. The media dubbed it the prosecutor in cuffs. The outrage was universal. Conservative legal pundits were horrified by the violation of property rights and the Second Amendment implications of the police assuming a gun meant a crime. Liberal commentators were furious about the racial profiling. It was the rare case where the entire political spectrum agreed. The police and the neighbor were wrong. Officer Miller was fired 4 weeks later. The Internal Affairs investigation found that he had violated 6 different department policies. His claim that he feared for his safety was debunked by the video showing Marcus standing still with his hands in the air. Kyle Vinson didn't just lose his reputation. He lost his freedom. The district attorney from the neighboring county brought in to avoid a conflict of interest charged Kyle with felony false reporting and perjury. The video on Kyle's own phone, which he had so proudly recorded, proved that he never saw a gun. It proved he lied to the 911 operator explicitly to ramp up the police response. Kyle pleaded guilty to avoid a 5-year sentence. He received 18 months in state prison. He lost his landscaping business. He was forced to sell his house to pay for his legal defense, a defense that failed. The civil suit against the city was settled in 3 months. They didn't want to go to discovery. They didn't want Marcus Thorne deposing the chief of police under oath. The settlement was $1.8 million. 6 months later, the moving truck was back at 4209 Oakwood Lane. But this time it wasn't Marcus and Elena leaving. They stayed. Marcus stood in his driveway, the same spot where he had been handcuffed. He was wearing his suit today. He held a check in his hand. He wasn't keeping the $1.8 million. He didn't need it. He had established the Thorne Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation for victims of unlawful police stops who couldn't afford a lawyer. Elena walked out to join him. She handed him a coffee. "You okay?" she asked. Marcus looked at the house across the street. It was sold to a nice young couple with a golden retriever. The silence of the neighborhood was back, but it felt different now. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of vigilance. "I'm okay," Marcus said. "But I'm tired, Elle. I'm tired that I had to be a chief deputy state attorney to survive a grocery run." "I know," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But you change things. Look at the new protocols. Look at Miller. Look at Kyle." "We caught them because I knew the law," Marcus said softly. "And because we had cameras. What happens to the guy who doesn't know the case law? What happens to the guy who doesn't have a ring camera?" "That's who the fund is for," Elena said. Marcus nodded. He took a sip of coffee. The sun was setting over Silver Creek, casting long shadows across the perfect lawns. "Justice isn't a natural state," Marcus said more to himself than to her. "It's something you have to force into existence every single day. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to prove you belonged in your own space? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. It's important we share these experiences. And if you believe that accountability shouldn't depend on your job title, hit that subscribe button. We have more stories coming that expose the system and show you how to fight back. Stay safe, know your rights, and never stop recording.